So with that, I'd like to now welcome our following keynote. I would like to introduce our Honorable Kevin McCarty, who's from the California State Assembly, and who's also a former colleague and early learning champion. But Assemblymember Kevin McCarty was elected to the California State Assembly in November of 2014 to represent Assembly District 7, which includes the cities of Sacramento, West Sacramento, and parts of, middle school level, sorry about that, unincorporated Sacramento. As chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education Finance, McCarty has been a champion for transitional kindergarten and young children. In 2015, McCarty helped craft an one-time state budget, which included the largest education investment in history, and increased access for early learning programs and community colleges, California State University, and University of California systems. This year, Assemblymember McCarty is authoring AB 2660, which is the Quality Early Education and Development Act, that would require the development of a multi-year plan to provide all 4-year-olds with a high-quality pre-kindergarten experience with a strong focus on improving quality. So our Assemblymember McCarty, he lives in Elmhurst, and he has 2 beautiful twin girls, and is married to Leticia. So his daughters are Victoria and Barbara. As I said, he's an amazing champion and friend of early education, and he's a former colleague at Early Edge California. So I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Kevin McCarty.
Thank you. Well, how about a hug? So I use this mic and that one? Yeah. Kind of tall there. Hi, good afternoon. Well, welcome to the 5th annual Transitional Kindergarten Conference, the TK Conference here in Sacramento. It's a great view out here to see so many people interested in kids, early learning, TK. And first I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to the 2 groups that put this together. Certainly Early Edge California and the New Teacher Center. Thank you very much. And how many of you are teachers out there, by the way? Okay. Well, 2 things. Number 1, thank you for being a teacher, a public school teacher. We need more of that and more focus on teachers. And number 2, this is a Teacher Appreciation Week, so hats off to you, right? Yeah, so we have 2 first graders, and so we took flowers to school today, right? Okay. So certainly it's, thank you for that nice introduction, Araceli. As was mentioned, for those of you who don't know, I'm an assembly member right here in Sacramento. This is my district, the 7th district here. I'm not sure if we have any educators from the Sacramento area here. And my big, maybe raising their hand over there, yeah. So my big focus is education. Certainly early education is a big component of that. I have the privilege of chairing the budget committee overseeing education funding from preschool and childcare, the K-12 system, all the way up through higher education. And so that's a big focus of mine, is to make sure that we really have a laser focus and invest in early learning. You all know that, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. So I want to speak a bit about early education in California, transitional kindergarten, and then, frankly, I'll probably stop and open up to questions from the audience, which is actually my favorite part. So, of course, this is the TK conference, and you all know the benefits of TK. You're out there on the front lines in the classrooms. But in the last, probably couple years, there have been a lot of questions as far as what is TK doing out there? What kind of results are we showing? What are the dividends? And so I'm pleased to announce, as many of you already know, there's a big research project concluded in the last few months by the American Research Institute, ARA, which shows that children in TK did significantly better in literacy skills and improved knowledge in math compared to their peers who didn't attend TK. So essentially they had 2 target groups, and they tracked the kids who went to TK and the kids who didn't go to TK, even kids who went to other preschool programs. And the kids who went to TK far and above had greater results when they entered the public school system in kindergarten. And before we get to more about TK, I just want to take a little trip down memory lane. This is the fifth conference on TK in California. But in 2010, this important measure became law. In 2010, I had the privilege of working with the advocates here and others maybe in this room to make this law a reality. And it really was a tough lift. There had been about a half a dozen to a dozen efforts over 25 years to change the kindergarten entry date and to create a program like this in California. And finally in 2010, through the leadership of then Senator Joe Cecelia from the Santa Clara area, we were able to pass this law. And we know that the questions that we had then were similar to the ones that we have now. The governor has this proposal to kind of eliminate TK. He also wants to take all the money and put it in a program just for lower income 4-year-olds, which we need to do in California, but throwing away the whole TK system and the public school system, throwing the baby out with the bathwater isn't something that we want to do. And that was the big discussion that we had, frankly, 6 years ago when we passed the landmark 1381. And just to paint a picture of how difficult this was at a time when we had a $25 billion deficit in California, when we were making cuts all across our school system and the state budget in all areas, and to be able to put something like this forward and get it passed was frankly kind of a miracle, and we certainly don't want to get rid of it. We know it's showing tremendous promise, and I just wanted to focus on a few quotes that people said the year we passed this measure in 2000. There was a fellow named John Mockler who was the author of Prop 98, the school funding measure. He just passed away about a year ago. And he called this one of the most significant education reforms in decades, perhaps akin to the state beginning requiring that schools offer kindergarten to children. There are not a lot of things that could be done to add education services in this magnitude. Our then governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who signed this law, recognized this as a landmark accomplishment for early childhood education in California. He noted, "This is the best improvement we can make in the future of our state to provide high-quality early education for California's children. This measure ensures that their academic careers are built upon a strong foundation." I know we have a lot of teachers here. The then advocate for the California Teachers Association, Jennifer Baker, said, this will create a massive impact on a whole generation of children, particularly students of color. When half of the kids entering kindergarten are Latino, it's not just going to help these 4-year-olds perform better, it will have ripple effects on many facets of education. Los Angeles Unified School District, who was one of the models when we created this program, talked about this as a tipping point. And it helps not only to have a consensus on the policy, but to have and point to say something that it's working. And it was working back then, their pilot, and now we know 5 years later that's working across California. And sometimes we know that this early education advocacy group is led by, frankly, people like you, teachers, early education advocates, people in the trenches. But I think what's most powerful is business leaders and groups across California said that if we want to have a well-trained workforce of the 21st century that's prepared for the jobs of today and tomorrow, we need to have better results in our education system. And they looked and said, what's the one thing that we could do in education? And they pointed to transitional kindergarten. And back then in 2010, the CEO of Kaiser Healthcare Systems, a guy named George Halverson, when this bill was on the bubble, his groups, the business groups said, hey, can you call the governor? And he called Schwarzenegger one night and gave the pitch to Arnold Schwarzenegger. This would provide tremendous benefits to children. He says, what do you care? You run a hospital, you run these business organizations. And he said, they're all linked together. They're all linked together. And so business really played a tremendous impact in making this piece of legislation law. Certainly know today there's a broad coalition of individuals that work in early education. We know it's a mixed delivery system. It's the unfortunate reality that we only have TK for 25% of the kids. Maybe one day we'll have TK for all in California, right? But we also know that the early education system also serves 4-year-olds in Head Start and the state preschool program. and the TK program is an integral piece of that proposal. We were able to expand a measure last year which allows school districts to enroll kids in TK mid-year. Essentially, for 4-year-olds who turn 5 mid-year later in the year, the school districts can essentially eat the ADA for those first few months and then receive the ADA once they turn 5. Some of your districts may be doing that today. That's certainly something that we would like to take advantage of and expand going forward. Back to the overall issue that we're focused on here today is TK and expanded early education. We know that even with TK for kids who happen to be lucky and win the lottery and born during the fall, and with families who are frankly having struggles and low income, either eligible for Head Start or state preschool, we know there are about 30,000 eligible low-income 4-year-olds that don't have access in TK, Head Start, or a state preschool, and they enter kindergarten. As you know, they're behind. You know, they start behind and they stay behind. And research shows that it has an impact on, you know, reading at the 3rd grade level, high school dropouts, impact on our criminal justice system. And so I think our priority number 1 is saving TK, but finding a place for these 30,000 kids in some system across California. As I alluded to earlier, the governor's budget has a proposal to create an early education block grant of $1.6 billion. So it sounds like, oh, he's putting $1.6 billion into expanding, but no, don't be fooled by that. And neither was our Assembly. 2 weeks ago, I'm pleased to report that our Assembly Budget Subcommittee, of which I chair, unanimously voted to reject this proposal with Democrat and Republican votes. And I think why that's important, and what I ask of you, is because people across California know that TK is working. You know, they've heard from parents at the grocery store, at the soccer fields, at community town halls. So keep talking to people in your community about how TK is making a difference and how TK is serving not just the state's population or school system, but frankly, a more diverse. We found research that shows that, for example, in Los Angeles, the students in their TK program are more diverse, more free and reduced lunch than the overall population as a whole. So TK, one of the arguments is that it's only a select benefit, and why should people with resources and means get this free resource when other kids don't? As we know, TK across California serves the same population that we're trying to help, but in some of the areas actually serves more. So remember that tidbit as we go forward. So again, this is certainly one of the top priorities, if not the top priority that I'm working on. As was noted in the introduction, I'm authoring a bill on this as well, which would state that California should have a multi-year plan to make sure we have preschool access for all low-income 4-year-olds in the state of California. And TK is a piece of the puzzle again. We're certainly pleased that we were able to, the last couple years, expand funding for early education. We've been able to put about $300 million more every year for the last 2 years. The year before that, about $100 million to expand child care and pre-K services in California. Of course, we know TK is funded through the ADA process, and so we're trying to incrementally increase that, and so we'll be at it again next year. And I can't think of any better thing that we could be focusing on in California than making sure we have a robust early education system that works to make sure that kids start kindergarten ready to learn. You know, I actually had the benefit of having our little first graders having not 1, not 2, but 3 years of preschool. And they started kindergarten last year. They were thriving. They're doing very well. And it was because of their preschool teachers. You know, maybe mom and dad read to them here and there, but you know, it was that preschool environment and teachers like you. And to me, it's a crime. It's a shame that too many kids in California start kindergarten without even, not just 3 years, not 2 years, not even 1 year. And so that should be our priority number 1 if we want to make a difference in results in our education school system in California. So again, thank you for inviting me here to participate. I know you're going to go across to the Capitol and talk to people in a little bit, right? And share your story. Keep doing so. And my last maybe suggestion to you is when you go back home, they're really busy here, their staff and so forth. When you go back home, invite an assembly member, a senator, or their staff to come visit your TK classroom so you can show them firsthand. Because frankly, you all know what TK is. You know that TK is not preschool, not Head Start, but frankly, a lot of legislators, there's so many issues they're dealing with, healthcare and housing and the environment, public safety and corrections, that it's all kind of garbled together, and so they kind of forget the nuances. So it's really, you really are the ambassadors of this, and so if you want TK to survive and thrive and grow, and maybe have TK for all one day, it's incumbent upon all of you to help lead the effort out there to keep this dialogue going. So thank you again for inviting me. I'm certainly excited here to answer a few questions, and so I'm not sure if we're going to have a microphone or have people stand up and yell what the deal is here. Yes, I can. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, by the way, I heard your question. Not everybody else did. This works. So I'll repeat the question. She asked, "It's great you're talking about pre-K and TK, but what about kindergarten and mandating that all individuals go to kindergarten?" And so that is on the agenda this year. There's been a couple bills the last couple years to have mandatory kindergarten. It's not compulsory, of course, in the state of California. So I support that. I know many of my colleagues do. The other thing that I think is a little bit troublesome is that kindergarten isn't full day, and I think we should fund a public school system that has full day kindergarten. We know that the countries and frankly some states that have higher education results have more minutes in the classroom, and that is mandatory kindergarten, but also I think full day kindergarten. Of course, working with you and making sure you're adequately compensated. So.
Any more questions? Does anybody have a question?
Hi. I live in Lake County, which is one of the poorest counties in California. We have expanded TK and kindergarten that are full day. I would like you to share with other legislators that looking at preschool for all does not mean just looking at low-income students. We have middle-class parents who cannot afford to pay for preschool, but make too much money to send their children to state-funded preschools. So we're missing a very large population of students who also need the TK program or preschool program, but can't afford. So we've got this large gap in the middle of the middle-income parents who are kind of missing out on stuff for their children. So I'd like you to share that also.
Okay. Well, two things. One, I want you to share it because they hear from me all the time. They need to hear from you. And your second point, you are right on, especially with the minimum wage increase. Not just the minimum wage increase we had a couple years ago. We know some jurisdictions, maybe not Lake County, but they've already increased their minimum wage in the coastal areas, in the Bay and Los Angeles. And many working class families, by no means are they well off, especially with the high cost of living. They're not even eligible now for the state preschool program. And so during the recession, we basically changed the eligibility to ration access. And so we're looking at increasing eligibility for the state preschool program. But you're right. I think the solution is to have a TK program that's available to the entire population. Because if you look at the statistics across California, the majority of students in the public school system are in that same demographic that you're talking about as far as income.
My question has to do with facilities and making sure that there are restrooms and that the playgrounds are equipped for 4-year-olds rather than for the 5+ kids that are in my school right now. I'm wondering if there's funding within the bill that will help us have space for the babies and a playground that's appropriate for them to play with.
Sure. A few things. Hopefully we're going to have a school bond on the ballot in the near future. That's one thing that I'm advocating for. Is historically you've heard the school bonds are the K through 12 or 16 School Bond Act of 2006. I think we should just change one letter to have it a P. P through 16. So school districts, LEAs can apply for some of those resources to whether it's their own program or working with nonprofits that run state preschool programs that could have the facilities. We're finding that's a big challenge. Even when we put more money on the street to expand the state preschool program or expand TK or have TK available, we heard from a lot of people the facilities issues and making sure restrooms can deal with little kids that have different standards than their basic elementary school system. And so that's an issue that we're looking to address in my legislation, where I'm talking about how we can have a preschool plan over the next few years to have a universal access to preschool for all of California. One of the issues that we're focusing on in the plan is dealing with facilities.
Okay. Since you've been talking about funding and minimum wage increase and all that, I just wonder in the future, can we look forward to ever seeing COLA actually go to the teachers as a COLA? Because I know our district, and I know a lot of districts, you have to fight so hard just to get a cost of living raise. We went 12 years without one in our district.
Okay. Point taken.
Got it.
Can I go? Hi. Is there any talk about student-to-teacher ratio? We've gone from preschool, where it's a 8-to-1 ratio, to TK classrooms that could be anywhere from 20 to 22 to 24 to 30 for one teacher. So it's a little difficult for our little babies. And I'd like you to see if you could address that issue,
Sure.
please.
Yeah. I'll just address that real quick. I think one of the benefits of TK for 4-year-olds having a year of pre-K before kindergarten is you're there with a credentialed teacher who knows what it takes to be an effective teacher. The bad news is you're in a classroom with the K-12 kind of rules, which have class sizes that can go up to 31. I went and visited our TK classroom a couple years ago, and there were 31 kids, and we had a choice, go to there, spend another year in our preschool, and did a kind of a quasi-TK year, and we went there because the ratio was 12-to-1. So the state preschool program, while the teachers don't have the credentials, they have the smaller class sizes, and so I think that's an issue going forward, that when we're looking at this state plan for what can be a good pre-K program for 4-year-olds, class size is critically important, as long as with the teacher qualifications and a number of other issues as well. So it's something that it's on the docket that we're taking a look at.
Thank you. So with that, I want to thank Assemblymember Kevin McCarty for joining us today and for answering your questions. Remember, your voice is really important, so tell the TK story. Whether you're participating in the advocacy workshop, we will be visiting with legislators, or if you want to extend an invitation to your legislators, your voice is really critical.
Yeah.
Mike, so they
One more
really
thing?
understand. Yes, Kevin.
Can I say one?
Absolutely.
Some people have lamented that unfortunately this governor isn't as pro early education and TK as we would like, and it is what it is. But the other side of the story is, in 2 years there is an election, and we're going to have a new governor. So I make sure that you and everybody, when you hear these candidates running for governor, when you see them or email them or talk to them, saying, what's your plan for early education? Some of the rumored candidates we know, like Newsom and Villaraigosa, they've been on the preschool kind of trained pushing this issue for many, many years. And so I think that we're very fortunate. But some of the others, we don't quite know so. So I encourage you and your advocacy to make sure that this is a top issue for the candidates running for governor in 2018.
Thank you. Okay, so, okay, it's back on. So thank you again, Assemblymember Kevin McCarty. So with that, we're going to be talking about a recent development. So as part of the state budget, there was some modules that are being developed to continue to support transitional kindergarten teachers. So I'd like to welcome Cecelia Fisher-Dahms, who's the Administrator of Quality Improvement Office in their Early Education and Support Division for California Department of Education. So I'm going to read her bio really quickly. Cecilia is responsible for California's early learning foundations, quality improvement activities described in the state's Child Care and Development Fund State Plan, Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant, and State Preschool and Infant Toddler Quality Rating and Improvement System Block Grant. That's a lot. Since her appointments in September of 2008, Ms. Fisher-Dahms has worked to create a cohesive early childhood education professional development system and updated child observation assessment system. Previously, she was a child development consultant in the Division Policy Office for 8 years. Prior to entering state service, Ms. Fisher-Dahms was involved in education for more than 25 years, administrating early care and education programs for 18 years, and teaching early care and education courses at the community college level and mathematics at the middle school level. She has an MBA and a community college credential for early childhood education and teaching credential with a BA in mathematics. Ooh. I wish I had a mathematics BA. So with that, I'd like to welcome Cecilia, who's going to, again, be talking to you about some wonderful opportunities for you to take advantage in your county.
Thank you very much for even the invitation to be here. I am very pleased, and I do have to say a big thank you for the educational advocate we have in Assemblymember McCarty. So thank you very much. The department appreciates that support. And my connection to kindergarten is that, okay, so you realize I started out as a junior high math teacher. I couldn't even imagine how you could possibly teach kindergartners. But my sister was a kindergarten teacher and is retired now. And I actually went to early care and education and recognized that there's a lot of learning going on there just because they don't read. So anyway, so I have learned to appreciate that and obviously have devoted the rest of my life to supporting that. I'm going to speak about I'm going to speak about a few things that were put into place back in 2015. In that budget, there was Assembly Bill 852, which actually put aside $25 million, and $15 million is set aside for stipends for transitional kindergarten teachers, so I hope that you're taking advantage of those. And then another specific $10 million is set aside for professional learning, and that's what I'm going to focus on today, is that piece. And I put the other one that I think has a bearing on that is that also Senate Bill 876 also says that, working with transitional kindergarten teachers would be beneficial, even though the multiple subject credential does go from preschool to 12, that what we were hearing and what the legislature was hearing was that moving into a class that was only transitional kindergarten really pressed the need to have a deeper understanding of child development and early learning. And so although the credential provided the breadth, there was really a need for some more focused attention and on that content of serving those young children. And so they made a specific requirement for either 24 units Okay, so if you were already doing that, you were grandfathered in. But if you were assigned back last July, then from that point forward and through before the school year of 2020, you had to get either 24 units in child development or early learning. You could have your district administrator look at your experience and see what is comparable to that breadth of hours. So for those of you who are those administrators out there, recognize that 24 units is a hefty amount of additional content and knowledge, although we don't have a method to test you on that. And then the third one is what we already have in place under teacher credentialing is a child development permit. So you could also get that teacher permit. And that would more likely impact transitional kindergarten teachers who maybe came from that arena and had their child development permit and then also got their teaching credential. So with that in mind, I'm going to look at some of these things that we're doing with that $10 million. Okay, so there are several things that we're funding. One is we're funding transitional kindergarten community college courses. And some of you might say, but why should we go to the community colleges? I've already got my credential and so on. We're investing in the community colleges because they have a breadth of early learning coursework. They are the strongest supporter of our early learning field. They're familiar with that content, and sorry, I see somebody I know. Thank you. And so that was one of the opportunities, was to work with the community colleges. We have already had some projects in place, which was through the 106 community colleges, we looked at aligning coursework, and so we're piggybacking onto that curriculum alignment project and creating coursework that is specific to transitional kindergarten teachers or administrators. And so those 24 units are going to focus, remember in the statute about transitional kindergarten, it talked about having a developmentally appropriate curriculum and also built on the state's early learning standards, of which we have the California Preschool Learning Foundations. That's the translation of the term standards in early learning. We use the term foundations. There are 9 domains that I'll look at shortly. So they'll have 1 unit courses on those, as well as coursework that would focus on the principles and practices of teaching that population, assessment tools, and what you would need to really measure progress for this population, and then a focus particularly on social emotional development and supporting particularly pro-social behaviors and how to address, I would say, the difference in that younger age child. So that's one of I'm going to look at several ways that we're using those monies. The second one I want to talk about is an existing system that we've had in place for the early learning field, which is the California Preschool Instructional Network. It has been in existence for, if I get this right, 15 years. Am I right? 15? 10, yeah. It was 10 and now it's 11. Thank you, Nancy. Okay. So 11 years. So it's been already existing, and its defined function was, in fact, to be the department's arm for training the field in terms of those states' early learning standards. And with the existing content, that preschool instructional network is modifying those modules so that they can speak to the transitional kindergarten community, to you, so that what might be, you might say, the terms of art that are maybe used in the early learning field might be more appropriate to the K-12 community. So they're working on making those available and using their existing structure, which is through the 11 superintendents' regions. I'm going to take just a moment to step into I've talked about the preschool learning foundations. I don't think it's in Assemblymember McCarty's bill, but one of the bills is actually looking at the state adopting early learning standards. I would just remind our legislators, although he has left, that we already do have state-adopted early learning standards that have been promoted from the state superintendent of education, which are those early learning foundations. We express them in 3 volumes. The little icons on the side are that they address those things that you would know in your kindergarten and also, so I'm going to just name them out: social emotional, which is the heart; language and literacy; English language development or dual language development; mathematics; visual and performing arts; physical development; health; history, social science, and science. So it covers the breadth of what we're doing. They were designed for children at 48 and 60 months, and so if we know what the young 4-year-old should be able to do at the end of 4-year-olds, that should tell you what the starting point is. If we know what they should be able to do in a supportive environment at 60 months, that should tell you where they should be before they enter in, for some of them, their 2nd year of kindergarten. So things are in place that you can already utilize. Some of you might be familiar with those documents. If you're not, I would suggest that you look at those as sort of like foundational, in quotes, information. Now, just as with K-12, we don't have an adopted, well, actually K-12 does have adopted curriculum, but we have adopted curriculum frameworks, which are taking what those knowledge, skills, and abilities are that we expect for children to be able to do at 48 and 60 months, and then providing a supportive document for what does that look like within your classroom, what kind of materials, what kind of engagement of parents do I need. All of those things are expressed in those curriculum documents, which again are in 3 volumes. But I'm just going to say that's going to be a good portion of the content of what would be provided through that preschool instructional network. Oh, I forgot to bring them up. But you should have flyers, I'm sorry, but you have flyers at your tables, I believe, about what is available, and my little show and tell, thank you. I got to that one. So they are available, and what's happening where, who, in the 11 superintendent regions, who are your contact persons for getting access to that. And these are people who are well-trained in understanding what we are expecting of this age group of children, and very knowledgeable in that. Okay, I'm going to go to another one that is a specifically developed set of professional learning modules for transitional kindergartners. We have a contract with Sacramento County Office of Education to engage a stakeholder group to really look at what would flesh out the additional kinds of things to really speak to your needs. So to do that, they conducted a statewide survey of what is it that we need, what would help to support administrators of TK programs as well as teachers, and also make those available through in-person training as well as ongoing online training. So whether there is a new person who's come in because of someone's temporary leave, and you want to make sure that everybody is starting from the same place, there'll be a body of knowledge that is always accessible for whether that's coming through your professional learning communities, through an educational specialist who would be providing training. They are also, hopefully am I off track? Oh, I forgot to keep moving these. I'm sorry. Okay, what am I not doing? I got one, okay. Somehow I'm not moving forward. There, I got that one, okay. Okay, I think I'm at the right place now, sorry. My apologies, okay. They will be conducting training for professional learning providers that could be within your districts, and they will also be doing that through the Cecelia 11 superintendents regions. They'll be doing trainer of trainers, so again, it's capacity building, so it isn't dependent on a particular time. That breadth of information can extend, and we're also working at having a community of practice to bring together the sharing of resources, materials, what's working, that kind of thing, through the department's My Digital Chalkboard. Do you remember there was brokers of expertise? Now this is My Digital Chalkboard. I think it might morph yet to be something else. SCOE will also be posting those modules and making those available. So that's a big step forward to in terms of that volume of information. We're also looking at what kind of continuing education units or professional development units that we can make that would be available. And the last bucket, how did I do that? Okay, I feel like I'm not the good person for this, but okay, it should be, I don't know where I'm supposed to be pointing. Maybe that's part of my problem. Okay. Got that one. Got that one. Okay. And my last bucket is we also have funding going to Cal State Fullerton to develop coursework particularly focused on the transitional kindergarten administrator, so that they will actually know that the classroom for transitional kindergartners might very likely look very different from the other classrooms. Good thing to know. Helping them to understand that they don't need, when they step into the classroom and they don't see everybody like sitting still, and then say, I'll come back when you're teaching. No. To understand that you are teaching and that children actively engaged in investigation is their work. So we think that would also be helpful to the field, and for those principals or superintendents out there, recognize that we need to know that what you're observing and what early learning looks like is actually different, and we'd actually, in the field of early learning, would like that to bubble up and to inform primary grade instruction, that children learn best by being actively engaged in exploring.